Good afternoon, thank you very much, and congratulations to Penrith Council for bringing together such a spectacular view of different people working in urban heat, worried about what we do going forward from here. And I think taking on the challenge of trying to say we need more people than ourselves to actually take on some of this and think how we can move forward together. So congratulations and thank you for having us all here today. My name's Beck, and I think we've been working here in Sydney, as John said, for 4 years on resilience and how do we make these sort of things happen on the ground. Before I started, I just wanted to ask a question of the audience. I'm going to just do a Slido in reverse, because I reckon that in this room there's very few people who are not already engaged in actually in your workplace. Part of your job is to make a tangible, practical impact on what happens in one part of Sydney. It might be a street, it might be where a tree goes, it might be the whole of the district planning, as Rod showed us earlier, it might be something to do with engineering and infrastructure or building properties. Put up your hand if you are tangibly involved in putting tangible things on the ground at some level here in Sydney. Yeah, it's pretty good coverage. Thank you very much. What I want to ask you though, and what I'm here to talk to you about is, what information are you using to help you make that decision when you are the person in the hot seat deciding what that little piece of Sydney that you are controlling will look like? But more importantly, what will it feel like when you are standing there? Because every single person in this room, if we're talking about leadership, has now also, in your next 3 years in your job, a tangible responsibility to do something about the decision that you will make in the project that you are doing that will change the outcome from today. No one of us is going to solve this problem. It's not somebody else's job. We all own it together. Because resilience is a team sport, and I'm here to tell you a little bit more about why we need to do something like that. You've seen the definition, and thank you to Sean from Frasers, who I did a presentation of the whole of the Frasers staff base 2 years ago, and I am so delighted that they're using our definition. They've really implemented that process. You can see it in the projects on the ground. Great example of what we're talking about. So shocks and stresses we were talked about earlier. Actually understanding how those systems fit together and work when you have a big event go wrong is a really good way of understanding what will determine survivability and recovery. So those shocks and stresses here for Sydney, we've talked about it. Extreme heat is the top shock for Sydney. It kills more people, it has more impact on infrastructure and cascading effects through water systems and electricity failures and transport network failures that can have really significant disruptions across the city. Where you live and who you are actually matters to how these things impact you. And that's partly why we're here in Western Sydney, because those things matter particularly here. When we talk about the stresses for Sydney, and we talk about health services already being under strain, in a heatwave event, they just get more exacerbated. So a shock event actually just shows up what already doesn't quite work, or where the important stress factors are that already exist in the city, and they magnify them. So that's why in the 100 Resilient Cities programs, now the Global Resilient Cities Network, we talk about how the shocks and stresses layer together. So we put together, obviously, a program across metropolitan Sydney. We have all 33 councils, mayors involved. Over these 4 years, we've pulled together, there's an ambassador for every one of those councils coming together to try and say, what do we do about the shocks and stresses in different places in the city? We have a strategy, which was released in 2018. It has 5 directions and 35 actions. Today, we're really talking about a whole lot of them, but live with the climate and actually getting ready. So how do we actually understand the impacts when the shock event happens, like a heat wave? And how do we live with the climate better? How do we understand heat? We did a big public engagement exercise across Sydney, and one of the core priorities that came back from the community, and this is what these 5 directions respond to, community priorities, was a real tangible frustration from the community about a real lack of actual action about adapting to heat and climate. And we're seeing that now in the community story as well. It's coming out more and more, but that's where this program came from. A beautiful example here of a recently delivered housing product and in Sydney, as it happens in Penrith, that I'm not sure I want to live in. So there's a question for all of us: are we making places we want to live in? That's a good one. So I'm just going to say, actually, what happens when we deliver places like that is we have a tangible impact on real people. People do live in these places, and it really matters. We did a research exercise which Kristen Gabriel led, who's my deputy over here. Give us a wave, Kristen. This is Kristen's work I'm talking a lot about today. This was funded by the Office of Emergency Management through a QUIP grant, and through the University of Sydney we partnered together. Actually, we did a focus group looking at 4 different big impacts or big shock events across Sydney to try and understand what did the community experience of a shock event. Not what the insurers told us, not what the infrastructure people told us, but actually how does the community experience these big events. So we looked at heat in Penrith. Particularly, we looked at the experience of the 2016-17 heatwave, which I don't need to tell you much, you can read the numbers, which are pretty shocking. A month pretty much of continuous extreme heat starts to really change the game on actually how livable are some of the places that we're really making. In the methodology for the focus groups, we actually gathered together the kind of a cross-demographic group of people from across Penrith. So they were gathered together and recruited on the basis of differences in age, gender, income, housing type and education. So got a pretty good cross-spectrum of people. It's not a representative sample, but it gave lots of insights into different types of experiences of heat. And some people said, oh, it didn't really affect me at all. And obviously lots of people said it affected me a lot. So I'm just going to describe a little bit of the process. They got to draw 3 maps in the process of a focus group. How did the heat wave actually impact you? What were the things that made it harder? What were the barriers? And actually what enabled you to do better? Like, what do you need to make it easier? What helped? Really simple questions. Has anybody ever asked them before? Not very often is the answer, I think, when we got into it. So I'm just going to talk about some of the things that we discovered when we asked those people. They put those maps together and then we layered them together and looked at where all the synergies were across the cohort of people. And these are some of the findings. The first one is that the single biggest impact is that it's too hot, and the buildings that we're providing actually don't really provide life safety in a heat wave, and it makes people really stressed because their life and the way that they normally live it is actually under threat. So they have lots of fatigue, lethargy, inability to get stuff done. We all recognise this, you've been in a heat wave. But when you're doing it for a month and your life is really seriously disrupted increasingly as that month goes on, you're getting too hot to care for yourself, it's difficult to do exercise, get out and do shopping, things like actually cooking food start to get untenable. You're not necessarily going to work if you're managing other people or caring for people whose lives are really disrupted by temperature. And who might have a chronic illness, for example, and you're actually already thinking things like, actually, if the transport links don't work because they work less, etc., etc. If you're a casual worker, you've already got a financial impact. So just actually understanding that these problems, if you like, that we kind of might experience in a small way in our relatively privileged bubble, for a lot of people who don't have access to the same resources as us, or don't have the same building providing the right life safety, the impacts are magnified. So exacerbating health conditions, people stop going out, they increased caring responsibilities, and those financial impacts start to get very real. Looking at barriers to coping, when you're starting to think about those, what kind of resources can you use to cope in these situations? Actually, you need more money. You need more money to pay for more air conditioning. If you have a blackout, you just filled the fridge because you only went out for 1 week to try and do your shopping and you brought it all in, and there you are, you got a blackout and you've just lost it. You lost the medicine that was in the fridge to go with it. Things are starting to get really complicated and you might only be in week 2. Actually, what do? How can you travel? If you're stuck in the CBD, the transport networks go down, you have to get home to care for somebody. What's it going to be? You know at this point that you are at the whim of the system if you're in this position. The community know they don't have the buildings that they need. They were perfectly able to describe what kind of building and what kind of shelter and services would help them in this situation, but they actually could also articulate that they didn't have them. In terms of what enabled them, what helps, and something we've discovered through the 100 Resilient Cities Network internationally, is that the single biggest helping point, if you like, is actually community connection. So how people are not isolated when they have access to people with air conditioning, where they have access to pools, they have access to friends who support them, sharing all those other responsibilities we've already described. The only thing is that they're not free. Even going to a shopping centre and walking around it costs you money, even in Penrith. So those experiences of looking at how you might access some of those cool areas, for example, is usually not free. The pool costs money to get into. And I don't know about you, but the last time I spent a month with my in-laws was a long time ago, and I don't intend to do it anytime soon again. But that's actually what lots of people are doing across this part of Sydney to cope. If you can go to someone who's got air conditioning, but then you're on top of each other, and then your social functions are also getting complicated. Solutions, what did they come up with? Yeah, really sensible list. These are sorts of things that we've been talking about, but they were able to articulate as well. Connections, refuges, information, better built environment, energy options, transport solutions, all things that all of you have some control over. So when we talk about how that plays out in place, at the moment, that's what we're delivering as the solutions for them. I don't think I need to say we're not meeting the need. It's starting to get clearer, I hope, that this isn't solving the problems that they've really clearly articulated when we asked them what they needed in order to cope better with heat. So there's all these pieces of the puzzle that need to come in where we talk about each and every one of these pieces. Every piece here has a role to play. The trouble is we're all doing it separately. In this example here, you can see how all the separate pieces have delivered. We've removed vegetation, we've increased energy use per square metre, we've created an increased temperatured microclimate, we're actually delivering heat absorption at scale, and we've actually added in density and reduced airflow. That's the outcome of that product that we collectively are all choosing to create. That's not what we need to deliver. So actually, if we start with the outcome in mind, how can we flip it and start with the community experience at the centre? Whose fault is it? Is anyone else feeling guilty? I am. Whose fault is it? The trouble is no one person owns it. We're all part of the system of all the pieces, so we need to work together to understand how the interplay of decisions I make connect with the decisions you might make with the connection to the decisions that you might make. How do those pieces come together so that we can actually make sure that the community experience is at the forefront? So my question to each one of us in this room is, how are we managing that risk in place? How can the place-based view and a user-centred or a people-centred approach come forward in the decision-making in the way that your decisions are made in the place you work? The community perspective gives a really clear technical accuracy to the outcome of what we are delivering. And how can we bring those voices really up front, like we did today in the presentation, to say, this is what this is about. This is who this is for. Am I meeting the outcome and the need of what it is that we are delivering? That's not just a housing product number, but a house of people who have to survive through 40 days of a heat wave that's coming. I guess the question here is, how can we bring them in? How can all of you bring those people into the story? You're all making good decisions within the rules that you have. Mostly, of course, all of you ethically. That's why you're in this room. So how can we do that with that purpose and that community outcome much more clearly articulated in the way that we deliver it? I started with resilience as a team sport, and I really mean it. It's really great to see so many different types of people here. Some of the projects we have running in Sydney that we can start to see emerging out of both state government, local government, but also through some of the industry bodies is starting to bring people together. We do need to participate, learn from each other, and particularly learn from the community to understand how we can do a better job. Thanks very much.